Hey, folks, welcome to this week's episode. We have Sarah Gonnella on, and I am so excited to talk to her about all sorts of things, who she is, how she became doing what she's doing in her life, leading her lit up life. She started a company called BOYBAS, and it's booming as far as live recordings. And we really get into things that happen to us, how it creates who we are, and also how we can look at surpassing limits that other people put on us. So you don't want to miss this one, so stay tuned. There's a moment in life when we sense an opening, where the life we've built begins inviting us into something more. Not because anything's wrong, but because we're ready for a deeper, truer expression of who we really are. This is the Lit Up Life podcast, conversations for those who are no longer interested in pushing, proving, or performing, and are ready to lead from truth, alignment, and inner authority. I'm Debbie Heiser, and here we talk about the inner shifts that change everything, how belief, identity, and energetic leadership shape the way you live, work, and choose. This isn't about becoming someone new, it's about coming home to who you already are. Hello, hello there. Welcome back to the Lit Up Life. I almost said Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser because that's what it was for 8 seasons. And we've just shifted names, or 7 seasons, and we are in our 8th season. And I am so excited to have Sarah here today, as the second guest, actually, for this season. And Sarah and I actually, and Mike, who you just listened to on February 23rd, well, you two knew each other. I met the two of you because I was on Sarah's live podcast. It wasn't recorded. And I'm going to let her tell you about it because I love the name of her business. And so, Sarah, I am thrilled to have you here today. But I want you to introduce yourself to our listeners, let them know who you are and kind of what you're about. And then we're just going to get into a conversation.
That sounds great. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. And I so enjoyed having you on the show to talk about the law of attraction, which you and I
Yeah.
have this love of the universal laws. And really, at first, I'm just honored to join you. So thank you for that. I guess who is Sarah Gonnella? I could say that, tell you that I have a live stream called Bring Out Your Badass Self that I host. That I'm also a business owner, but for me, that's sort of the boring answer. And, really, whenever it comes down to it, the truth is, I've always been a little bit of a troublemaker in life.
Ah,
And
the rebel.
and someone who asked why one too many times, at least that's what my parents used to say, that it was my favorite word. And my husband reminded me of this recently. He was like, "Why do you always ask me why?" And so really nothing has changed. And I've never been comfortable with because that's why it is.
Yeah.
And that's really who I am. So whenever I think about who I am, I'm the person that wants to know, why should I behave that way? Why
Mm.
should I believe that? And who decided that's the rule? And when I look at things, I do weigh the consequences, but I'm still the one willing to push the line and, more importantly, sort of question why the line even exists in the first place. And so
Yeah,
for me,
Sarah, I got to break
yeah,
in here because it was a commercial. So I'm a
yeah,
nerd when it comes to the Olympics. And by the time people hear this, the Olympics will be over. I think the Paralympics still will be going on.
yeah.
But there was this awesome commercial that was about like the whole science sequence of observe,
Mhm,
create data. I don't even remember the sequence we learned in grade school, right? But like this whole thing, and then it was like test, start all over, right? Like observe.
mhm,
And that's kind of as you were talking about that, like data is knowledge, right? And
mhm,
so like that came to mind for me that it's just this constant revolution, right?
mhm.
It doesn't mean we're in a hamster wheel. It doesn't mean we're doing the same thing over and over again, but
Yeah.
it's this idea of observe, observe, try, like then take data to make decisions as you go forward. So I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
just had to throw that in there because it just
No,
reminded me
and
of that.
and that's perfect because in marketing, one of the things that I've always said is you got to make a decision
Yeah.
and you got to try something. And then once you try it, you now have more information, you have more data to be able to then apply. But you got to be able to make that decision and
Yeah.
do things. So for me, I've always been a problem solver. And I think that probably started on early on because of my life. But I would say that my superpower is probably more curiosity
Mm.
into things and just understanding why I don't bend to other people's expectations of who I'm supposed to be. So ultimately, it's about stopping, that I won't stop asking why. And I also won't apologize for where that takes me as well.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And Sarah, tell me this whole BOYBAS, what it stands for, and I want to hear the story about how this name came about.
Yeah. So Boy Bass, it stands for Bring Out Your Badass Self.
Hmm.
And let's see, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 2023. In January of that year, I contacted someone that I worked with and I was also friends with, and I was inspired by a lot of different things. And by March 17th, we ended up launching. So originally
Wow.
I launched everything in 2 months. I had the name, I had the logo, I had everything that we wanted to do. I had the first, many episodes already planned out. And I remember the person that I co-hosted with at the beginning, she had said, I was worried later on that we weren't going to have enough content, but for me, ideas constantly flow and there's all kinds of different ways that you can talk about different things. But for me, it was really about helping people to understand that the things that you go through in life, everyone goes through. They're just different things.
Yeah.
You decide what it is that, how it is that you're going to lead your life based on those experiences. And so for me, I wanted to show people and bring people on and have them hear some of the just some of them were horrible stories, and you're
Yeah.
just like, whoa, how did anybody get over that situation? But to show them that there's more in life, that you can go through these things and find a way to be able to overcome, and more importantly, that you can actually find strength within the things that sometimes happen to you. They bring about an ability, a strength that you didn't even know was there.
Yeah, so Sarah, that makes me want to ask the question. It sounds like some of this came from personal experience because you even
Yeah.
mentioned like based on your life, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can get into as much detail as you want to, but like,
Yeah.
what would you say, like, what clicked for you when you were going through something to create that resiliency, to create that, decision making to say, yes, I could go down this route or I could go down this route
Yeah.
as a
Well,
creator, right?
yeah, as a creator, for me, I ended up finding from the things that happened to me, and I'll just briefly state a little bit about what happened. So, whenever I was younger, I was molested between ages 6 to 7, so for about a full year. So, as you can imagine, the things that you go through after that happens, you're trying to figure out who you are as a person. You're also exposed to sexuality at an early age. And so, as I continued to become a woman in life. And as I started to be in relationships and things like that, some of those patterns or some of the things that you learn along the way really can limit you and keep you in a particular box. Because you've learned certain things, you can have shame brought about you, even though it wasn't you that did it. There's shame that is brought upon you. And so for me, I ended up finding the inner strength within me to understand that this wasn't my fault. And even though people say, oh, yeah, I know it's not my fault, for whatever reason, as a victim, sometimes we end up, or I should say survivor, but at the time, a victim. At the time, I was thinking this was my fault. Like, oh, I didn't do stuff. And one of the things that I always, whenever I do talk to other people that have gone through this experience, I say, have you forgiven yourself? And they're like,
Mm.
wait, I don't have anything to forgive myself with. And I was like, okay, think about that. Are you still feeling like you should have done something, even though you know mentally that there was nothing that you really could have done at that particular age? We still have this shame and this feeling that there's something we could have done. So for me, I ended up using that and finding strength within myself, finding intuition that I never, never have had I not gone through that particular experience.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think about too, I don't know about you, but I had a similar experience, slightly different, but similar. And there's a lot of people in my extended family that don't know,
Yeah.
right? It was an uncle who was young and he passed away at the age of 16, 6 months after it happened. And
Mm,
so I think too, whenever I've run into survivors of molestation, particularly,
yeah.
that there is this fear that you're going to be kicked out of the tribe. Like, because we
Mm,
know at a very young age what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in your tribe. And there's safety in that tribe. And so part of what I was hearing you say without actually saying is kind of understanding that part of the guilt and part of the forgiveness for yourself is even because I remember saying, why didn't I tell anybody?
yeah.
Right. And then as you start to unwind some of those things, so those layers of different guilt that you have to unwind about yourself too. So,
Yeah, the interesting part is I did tell someone, I told someone 3 years later, but it still was like this secret amongst
mhm,
the family.
yeah.
And nothing ever happened as a consequence to this person doing that. So later on, as I started to think about those things, I started to think about the fact of what is that telling me as a child?
Mm,
As well. So I had to like also deal with that and deal with sort of that wound of
yeah.
parents being there for you and yet not also being there for you, like that duality that is there in the situation. So I had parents that listened to me, they did believe me. And I also wasn't necessarily protected because that person continued to come around.
Mhm.
And even though that person never violated me again, they still were was this
Right.
person that was still around. So you're having to deal with that as you're growing older in understanding there's no consequences for doing
Yeah.
what it is that that person just did.
Yeah, that's so true. And so I kind of think about that and how that shaped you.
Hmm.
And, part of what we were discussing before we got on was this idea of who are you and how did you become this woman that you are today, making such a difference in helping people see and understand universal law, understand, because I don't know about you, but I feel so much more empowered understanding
Yeah.
universal law and really how that propelled you forward. And then we'll take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit about the ceiling, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So repeat the question. You want me
Yeah,
to
sorry, I
focus?
kind of
Yeah,
got off
yeah.
there.
No.
So we were talking about a little bit about who you are and how you became this person that you are, and how a piece of that story is going through molestation. But then
Mhm.
also, as you looked at Boy Bass, like how did that name,
Mm.
right? Like you wanted to bring in empowerment and things for different people, but kind of tie that in for us.
Yeah. For me, I think Boy Bass was also for me. It
Yeah.
was also really understanding that I can empower myself to be the person that I want to be, to find my fearless, authentic self. So not only was it empowering other people to become their fearless, authentic self, each episode, I'm still learning so much from so many other people. So I love the fact that I'm able to interview people like you and other people that I'm learning from and the experiences that they're going through while also giving that gift back to other people. So for me, that's, it's one, it's for me, it's a something that I love doing just because of all the amazing insights that I gain from different people and being able to reach out to people and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I don't know you, but let's talk."
Yeah.
But also the people that have come to me and have said that I have helped them. And that was
Mm.
really our purpose when we first started is we don't care whether we're helping one person or hundreds or thousands of people. If we're helping someone, then as long as we were doing that, that's when we would continue. And unfortunately for my co-host, she was going through some things and couldn't continue. But for me, it still was inspiring me and still something that I wanted to continue to give back to the world.
Yeah, Sarah, part of what I love about that is just this whole idea, I teach servant leadership. And so, like, this idea of an act of service for yourself and for others, right? And that's a
Yeah.
win-win in my
Hmm.
book. And
Yeah.
so, when I think about that and I think about, like, why keep going? Why is it important for people to bring out their badass selves?
Yeah. I think it's because I still have people reaching out to me. I
Yeah.
still have people that are saying thank you so much for what it is that you do, that they are inspired
Mhm.
by this. And I think that sometimes people will misconstrue the name of badass as being someone that is tough and, will just get through it. No, being a badass is about being vulnerable. It's
Yeah.
about understanding and gaining awareness about yourself, understanding the flaws that are within you, the things that, that you have to unlearn, the things that are allowing you to go inward to really then awaken and understand where your power is in this world and where you're meant to be. That is why I continue on, because I believe that this is where I'm meant to be, is to
Yeah.
continue to help people understand that they don't have to settle. They don't have to limit themselves.
Yeah, awesome. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And that was a really good segue that you did there, Sarah, because one of the things that I want to talk about when we get back from our break is this idea of limits, right? And I'm going to start us off with a little story, but we'll be back. We're going to take a quick break. I want to pause for a moment because if you're listening to this, we were not meant to do this work alone. Build Her is the community I created for women who are building meaningful lives and businesses and want to grow without burnout, self-abandonment, or shrinking to fit. Inside Build Her, we gather monthly for real conversation, intentional teaching, and grounded connection with women who get it. This isn't about hustle, and it's not about fixing yourself. It's about being supported as you lead with clarity, confidence, and intention. So if you feel the pull towards a steady, honest, and expansive community, you're welcome here. Find the link in the show notes or join us at thelituplife.com/buildher. Okay, we are back, and thank you for tuning in and staying with us through the breaks and all of the different things that happen with this. But Sarah is here, and we've been talking about this whole idea of really loving all parts of you, because being aware of all parts of yourself and being able to look at the areas that you do want to shift or evolve from. And one of the things that we started to talk about before we went to the break was this idea of limits. And before we got on the actual recording, Sarah and I were talking, and I was mentioning a story that I love to tell around if you put fleas in a cup, they will jump out of the cup. If you put fleas in a cup and put saran wrap over the cup, they'll just hit the saran wrap. And then when you peel the saran wrap off, they don't jump out of the cup. They just keep going up to where the limit was that they were there. And I know one of the things that you're really passionate about is this idea of limits or not, right? Like, so let's talk about that. Tell me, like, this whole idea of what got you into owning who your badass self is, and talk to us about limits.
Yeah. What got me into finding my badass is really about self-awareness,
Mhm.
and digging in and understanding more about emotional intelligence and understanding more about the things that maybe I don't want to face. So that unconscious aspect of me that I don't really know. And my depth psychologist that I meet with would say that 90% of me is unknown to even me. And that's where I love to spend time with understanding and doing analysis of my dreams, or understanding why it is that I believe something and questioning why it is that I believe something. And so when I look at the things that we are taught, and sometimes we don't even realize where we learn some of those things. It's understanding who it is that tried to impose that narrative on us. And sometimes that narrative, or the things that the self-limiting beliefs that we sometimes have, are really things that we have placed upon ourselves. And that's where I think it really gets interesting, is understanding sometimes other people try to impose things on you, but sometimes it's really about the things that you impose upon yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the work I do is
Mhm.
really, I mean, I help people make a lot of money, but it's really about unwinding the untruths. And to your point, they're really sometimes insidious, sometimes we don't know any different.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but there are messages that come from, whether it be religion, whether it be come from our parents, and they're
Yeah.
just cycling. So sometimes there's a cycle. One of the things that I always talk about with people is the fact that, if you had parents that grew up or grandparents that grew up in the United States, you have scarcity mentality because
Mm,
they all went through the Great Depression. They all went through, some of them went through the Dust Bowl. If they came from Europe, they went through World War II. Many of them had to leave their homes, right? So we get into this like methodology of things. And I always joke when I teach sales, how many of you heard that paper or that money doesn't grow on trees?
Right.
But it does because it's paper.
Right.
Right? Like, and so when you think about it, like I get the point of it, but like unwinding sometimes these stories that we just don't, we haven't seen a different perspective of it. And so I
Yeah.
want to know from you, what would you say has been one or two of the greatest learnings that you've had about not limiting yourself?
Mm.
And do you have some tools to share with our listeners?
Yeah. I actually have an interesting story related to sort of history
Yeah.
as I started to think about limits. When we think about the limits that we face each day, that can come from our government, it can
Yeah.
come from our jobs, it can come from our family, it can come on the boundaries that we set on ourselves. And when we limit our choices in things, I have found that there are really some key things that we tend to do. The other day, I was actually talking to my daughter about this, and I asked her, I said, "Do you know the song I Can't Drive 55?" And for those that are more my age, you will probably remember this particular song. But I told her, I said, and I ended up going back and doing a little bit of history lesson in this. And the year that I was born, which was 1974, I'm dating myself, President Nixon actually signed into effect this law that kept us from being able to drive past 55. So there was a cap on this. And the purpose of it was to conserve gas and
Right.
a bunch of different things. But whenever in 1984, Sammy Hagar came up with this raw rebel vocal that was singing I Can't Drive 55. And so I was in fourth grade at that time. And that really was a song that etched a strong memory in my brain. But it wasn't until later that they ended up finally, I think it was in 87, they ended up jumping it to 65 miles per hour. Certain
Yeah.
states did. And then finally in 95, they ended up getting rid of it altogether. And so the reason that I'm saying this is that when they started to look at things, sometimes people put limits on you, and their limit was because they wanted to make it safe and they wanted to have energy of fuel efficiency. But then, if you look at other states like Montana, for example, after 4 years they of no daytime speed limit, they actually had the lowest fatality rate. And the reason that this is important is that there's sort of three things that we can do in life. We can either accept it, we can live within that limit that is placed upon us and carry on, or we can submit to it, let it define us, shrink us, and rewrite who it is that we're now going to be, or we can
Yeah.
resist it and we can crank that engine, crank the volume, crank our convictions, and really go after what it is that we want in life. But I think that it's also important. One of the things that I've been learning is that none of the paths are right or wrong in every single case. It has to depend on what you're wanting. Are you wanting freedom like Montana, or are you wanting to save lives, like other states, we're wanting to be able to limit it. And so the real question for me was, what limits am I facing? And will I roll against it? Or, will I rage against it? Will I reframe it and, use it as a stepping stone? Because ultimately the choice is ours,
Yeah.
our life at our speed, because ultimately it's our story. And so for me, that particular story sort of illustrates how it is that we have choices in life. And for me, it's always been pretty much put the gas down. I have a lead foot, as everyone knows, and but I also will look at like the impact of those things. So
Yeah.
it's balancing those two things out for me. But for some people, they're very safe and that's what works for them. So ultimately, it's about figuring out what you're wanting in life. And that's what I have done as I've continued to look at things.
So I'm never gonna hear that song again the same way.
I
I love
love it.
it. So quickly give us like what is a tool that you've used to help
Mhm.
you identify maybe when there's a limit? Because a lot of those limits live in our subconscious, right? And we're not
Yes.
aware. And
Yeah.
so what are some tools or a tool that you've used to bring things into your awareness? You were talking about that before the break.
Yeah, I think I go back to the question of why
Yeah,
as well. I will first set and I will meditate. And this is something that I didn't always enjoy. When I first started out, having gone through what I went through, I ended up going through counseling. And one of the things that they taught was to meditate. And I hated it. Like my mind was racing. I'm like, let's just go. You know, that lead foot, like, let's
yeah,
go. But the more that I've taken time to really meditate in the morning and just sit there and feel what my
mm,
body is telling me, feel whatever's going on in my mind, bringing back to present. And then whenever I see something or have something that comes to light, or, whether it's a dream, it's asking, what is that little character? What does that mean? And then understanding like the spiritual meaning of what that is. So for
yeah,
example, the other day I saw this little toad and it was a little frog and it was just its eyes. And so then looking up what it is that that means, and it tells you a little bit more about your story and where you're at in life. So for me, it's just continuously asking why and building my awareness and how it is I'm feeling
yeah,
with things. It can actually be rather simple, but it's just being cognizant of how it is you're feeling and understanding, maybe going back, well, why do I feel this way? What does
yeah.
this connect me to?
Yeah, Sarah, and really quickly, one of the things I did, I'm using from the trail, I've been doing these for a little while now, about the fact that when I use the word feeling, I talk about where are you feeling it in your body. And that's
Yeah,
kind of what you're talking about. And the emotion is the name that we apply to that
yeah.
outcome or that feeling, right? Like, so I would, just a quick body scan, like you're saying, meditate and kind of feel where you're feeling things in your body, tension or tingling or just different things, and then asking that question why, like what's behind that. And
Yeah.
and then you can attach a feeling to it. I always talk about how fear and excitement feel the same way in your body, right?
Mm,
We just place a meaning on it, so it's a matter of choosing which meaning we want. So
yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much. This has all been such fantastic information, and I hope everybody has gotten out of it as much as I have about limits and about showing up as your true authentic self and really looking at, like, really what I'm hearing you say about being a badass is owning it, right? Like
Hmm.
owning who you are and understanding who you are. So we're going to understand a little bit more about you. And if we asked you, which I'm going to, what book has been instrumental to you or a book that you would recommend to people, what would it be?
I actually have a couple of different ones. The one that was probably most influential early on would be How to Say No When You Really Want to Say Yes. It was something like that, and it was a book that I was given that was given to me, and it didn't really resonate with me until later on. It was about boundaries and understanding the power of no, and that no is a complete sentence. And so it's really about understanding and being comfortable with saying no, when a lot of times you're pressured to feel like you should be saying yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say when we're shitting on ourselves, that's our critical parent, right?
Yeah.
And then thank you. Yeah, it reminds me of a Shonda Rhimes book called The Year of Yes, kind of the same
Yes.
concept. And then if we were to go out and go to your streaming platform, what would be your most played song?
Ah, this is hard. I will say that the easy answer will be 80s. So I am an 80s baby, so it's going to be anything from that era, maybe getting into the 90s as far as hip hop. I will say that the song, so I am a singer, one of the songs that my husband loves to hear me sing and he insists upon every time is Don't Stop Believing, which
Oh, yeah.
sort of very much fits with today as well.
Don't stop believing. I'm not
Yeah.
singing it near as well as you probably can, but yeah. Okay, so everybody turn your Spotify on or your Amazon Music and go listen to that Journey song, Don't Stop Believing, because that's so true, Sarah. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here today. And in the show notes, we will have how you can get a hold of Sarah if you are wanting to reach out to her. I know she's on LinkedIn, and we'll have all of that for you in the show notes. And so, Sarah, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
I appreciate you having me today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Folks, we will see you in a couple of weeks and keep an eye out. We've got some exciting things coming up here in May. We have a retreat here in Sandpoint, Idaho, really inexpensive to walk you through lead generation all the way to it goes into the conversation we were talking about. It's called From Hello to Hell Yes, and building clients that rave about you. And then we are going to have something coming down the pike that people might want to get involved in to hear more great content like this. So, Sarah, thank you again. Everyone, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Go out and lead your lit up life. Thank you for being here and for choosing to spend your time in this conversation. If this work resonates with you, subscribe to the podcast and stay with us as we continue to explore what it means to lead, grow, and live with intention. Let's build your version of the lit up life. I'll see you in the next episode.